I am super happy to have kidnapped for you some Flink experts, and I'm going to ask them some questions, but I'm also going to keep an eye on any questions you bring in the chat, and we will get these experts to answer your questions as well. My name's Lorna. I run developer relations for Ivan. I'm really here just to make things run smoothly today. Please don't ask me any hard Flink questions. I literally have people for that, which is a huge amount of fun. So I'm going to start by introducing Julia, who may be suffering from panel fatigue. If you're thinking, didn't I just see this person in over there? Yes, by the powers of virtual events, he ran very quickly down the corridor between the two rooms. Julia is a principal software engineer at Cloudera, a long-time Flink contributor. I mean, there's Flink contributor, and then there's long-time Flink contributor. And I asked him about this. Turns out he's also king of the understatement. He's a core project superhero, and we are super happy to have him here.
Thank you for the introduction.
I'm going to introduce you to Elena. Elena is Ivan's Flink superstar. She's building our integrations, but she's also educating all of us on like what this is even for, why it's cool. I love her demos. And so I've brought her along to share how she sees it and what she loves about this, which I'm very excited about. And last but not least, I've also brought Francesco. Francesco's working in developer relations at Ivan, but he has a secret past as an escaped data engineer. And I know that he says rude things about having to wait for overnight data exports. And so he loves Flink, and at Ivan, his main superpower is asking the hard questions. So that's our panel. They're going to be answering your questions today. So I'm going to ask each of you to tell us a bit about yourself and about your relationship with Flink. I've preempted you to some extent, but I think the audience really want to hear it from you. So Julia, why don't you start?
Yeah, thank you. So my experience goes back to the initial versions of the Flink streaming API. And I've been working on Flink streaming ever since. Put it into large-scale production as one of the first bigger users at King like 6 years ago. Yeah, and I've been writing all kinds of streaming applications ranging from mobile games to, I don't know, anything that you can think of. So I'm super biased towards Flink, so don't take any of my answers seriously. Yeah, that's
okay, let's Elena, why don't you go next?
Yeah, thank you. So I work with the Flink, started from version probably 1.7, 1.8, so not that long. However, I saw some big changes that happening recently with the Flink, especially with table API, SQL. One interesting note is that before starting working with the Flink, I work with a thing called Spark. Some people, yeah.
Oh no!
And
why didn't you say this?
Yeah, horrible. Well, I mentioned this for a purpose, just to say that I'm not now really happy to use Flink. If you ever use and tune Spark cluster, you understand how perfect Flink is. Sorry, if there is some Spark fan, a fan of Spark, I'm sorry. That's my opinion.
I tell you, you're very sorry. Francesco, tell us about your relationship with Flink.
So it's amazing that Julia started like years ago. Elena started with 1.8. I started recently with Flink because I started with 1.13. So not a while ago. My background was in different technologies, different cases, but I've been doing data and analytics for a long time. And as you briefly said initially, I've been on the other side of the fence for a long time. I've been waiting for data in order to build a dashboard the day after, sorry. And this has been a common pattern for a long time in my career. So when I started understanding the power of streaming services, Kafka initially, and then Flink, basically my eyes opened. And that has been a revelation. And that's why I'm here.
Okay, that is fantastic. I particularly like the little bit of tech contempt for Spark there. That was hugely amusing. And say hi to everyone in the chat. I see Martin and Till sharing their hellos and their location. I'm hoping that the audience are going to stay awake and type questions for you in the Q&A. But if not, I have hard questions of my own. But we'll start with the easy ones. And I think I'm going to start with you, Francesco, because I know you're a big fan of Apache Kafka as well as Apache Flink, obviously, and the streaming data. So what makes Kafka a great fit for streaming data, and why does that fit together with Flink?
Okay, as I said, we are moving away from batch exports and processing and stuff like that. We want to enter the streaming world. And in order to do that, you really want a platform that supports you, that is performant, that is scalable, and that has been proven to be successful. And Kafka, it's kind of the perfect match in this kind of phase. But when you then use Kafka, you discover that it's beautiful. It has Kafka Connect to connect your Kafka instance to the world, but then it's kind of a messenger. So it takes data from one place and pushes the data on the other place. And you want to level up your game. You want to start performing analytics. And here Flink enters the game because it allows you to do powerful streaming analytics. And then it has also a couple of additional benefits. The first one being that it understands the architecture of Kafka. So what are the topics? What are the partitions? And optimizes the workload across for those parameters. The second thing, and the second beauty of Flink, is that, of course, you want to perform analytics on top of Kafka because it's your giant database. But you don't want to use a specific tool only for Kafka and another tool for the rest of your data pipelines. With Flink, you can use the same tool and attach it to Kafka, to a database, to something else. And Flink supports this kind of vast range of data platforms, both as input and as output. So I believe the conjunction of Flink and Kafka is really powerful, but also including both into a wide technological ecosystem is also something powerful that can take your company in the streaming world.
Okay. So you've really sold me on this combination. I think we've got something really great here. So my next question is for Elena. Is it as good as Francesco made it sound, or what are the common challenges you see? I know that we use a lot of Kafka, so you're using Flink with Kafka. When is it not so great?
When it's not so great. Okay. Can you please stop me? Because I can talk about this for like next 2 hours.
Okay, 3-minute timer. I'm starting now.
No, 3 minutes is too small. Can I have a 5 at least? Okay. So one thing in Ivan that I'm currently working on the Kafka and the Flink services. So we provide mostly Kafka for our customers and also Flink as a helper to the Kafka. And what I saw quite often is that the common challenge in using both Kafka and Flink is to have skew data. When you look at any even in Flink Forward conference, you can see that probably there will be talks or two that say that if you want to optimize something, make sure that you don't have a skew data. So it means that in a Kafka you have like 10 partitions, and only one partition have like 5 gigabytes, and the rest of the partition have like 2 megabytes, right? And on a Flink conference, you can mostly hear the point of view of the Flink that then you can do this and that. However, for the Kafka itself, it's also a problem. So when your node in Kafka restart, when you make an update, your Kafka also will suffering. So this skew data is not only bad for Flink, as a consumer of this data, it's also bad for the Kafka. So if you see the Skew data in your Flink data, reading from Kafka, please make the person who produced this data stop. This actually, the skewness of a data usually happened because of the misplacement of the keys. So usually in Kafka, the partition are assigned by the keys. And what usually happened, right? You make like 3 nodes, one in Germany, one in UK, one in Sweden, right? And you have like each of them have a key, like GB, UK, Germany, UK, and so on and so forth. And then in UK, as a result, because of the business reason, in UK you have 1,000 requests per second. In Germany you have 10 requests per second, and in Sweden you have 2 requests per second. And as a result, you not only your Kafka suffering, your performance, also the Flink suffering when you try to process this data. So also, please be aware of it when you also generate data in Flink, when you make a job in Flink. So please be also careful what you generate back to Kafka, because you could be this person who spoils things up.
But if you're the manager of the Kafka services, I think you're in a good position to just kill the jobs. I mean, you don't have to ask anybody. You can just take control and.
Yes. I actually I want to share one example when you actually can do something on the Kafka side. An example is that imagine that you are owning a store that sells the headsets, TV screens, and stuff like this, right? And then you decided that that your keys should be the type of the item, like screen or computer or headset, and so on and so forth. And it's totally reasonable things to do in e-commerce, right? And then Black Swan came, and then suddenly in one day, person decided to buy all of the possible video cards on your store. Then they DDoS in your site, and all of the clicks, 99% of all of your clicks are dedicated to NVIDIA video cards. Because something is wrong in China production, and everyone wants to buy a new video card, and it's very expensive. And this actually happened. And you can tune actually the Kafka. You can first to avoid this to happen. First, you can reduce. You can set up the queue max amount of request in a broker. The maximum amount of requests that waiting there. The second, socket receive buffered bytes, and number message max bytes, and batch sizes. This is important metrics, so you can actually change to a bit makes this Black Swan influence of this Black Swan on you a bit easier.
I thought that was very restrained. Thank you. I do have a clear picture of several things I probably shouldn't have been doing with Kafka and now must not do with Flink. So that is awesome. And we've got a great question coming in from Martin. And Gila, you might want to pick up on this first and see if the others want to join in. And they ask, what do you think that is missing or incomplete currently in Flink? And this is maybe unfair because I know that there's so much that has already been done. But what are you hungry for next?
Okay. Well, that's a very broad question. I don't know. I'm gonna have to pick like one topic here. Maybe I'll pick something from the SQL side of things because that's something that I've currently been working on a lot recently. One thing that I think is missing in Flink at the moment is like good operational support for SQL queries in production, like guaranteeing like SafePoint compatibility between SQL jobs. Because for regular Flink applications, I think it's difficult to say something that is really missing. I mean, and even this answer is a bit forced because I think Flink is awesome. And if you looked at the keynotes and some of the presentations on last year from Flink, you can see that Flink is like taking giant strides in every release to be better, and the community is adding features at an incredible pace. So Francesco said that he's joined recently, and I think it's one of the best times to join Flink because I mean, it has been awesome the last like all the years, but I mean, now it's getting really, really good. And I mean, no matter where you look within Flink, you will find a lot of cool tech that is basically pushing the envelope, no matter like connectors or cloud support or operations. Yeah. So yeah, I don't want to say anything that is really missing. I think it's awesome.
Can I add one thing here? Because I actually got an interesting discussion this week publicly on Twitter with Martin about one thing. I was basically using SQL client, and it's amazing. As you said, Gyula, it's incredible. It's really complete, allows me to do a lot of transformation. I was creating a simple table on top of Kafka. And I created the statement, create table with all the parameters. All the parameters were correct. Send the statement, receive a generic error. Your statement is incorrect. I spent like 20 minutes trying to understand or check all the commas, check all the strings, and everything seems to be correct. The error was that I didn't copy the full create word, but I only copied the create, missing the C.
Ouch.
So what we agreed on, both me and Martin, was that having something that tells you exactly where the problem is in the SQL statement will do a gigantic step. I know that this is the case if you write a transformation, but for that specific create statement, it took me 20 minutes before figuring out that it was, of course, my mistake, but the tool itself didn't tell me where the mistake was.
Yeah.
So
I
that
think
may be.
Yeah, I think some of the commercial tools already has gone some way to solve this on the market. Verberica, Cloudera, and some other companies are like kind of trying to build on top of the SQL functionality to make a better user experience. But I agree that the SQL client, even though it has been improved a lot, it's still there is a bit to desire there. Yeah, but I mean, I look at the SQL client at this point, especially if we look at the SQL CLI, more of like a prototyping tool. I think once you start to write production applications, you're probably going to use the table API and kind of embed your SQL there, because there are probably different things that you want to configure in addition as well.
Yeah, just a note on that. I completely agree with what you're saying. The SQL client will be probably the tool used to do the initial interaction or to do the prototyping. And I'm adding something on here, since this will be kind of the first touch point. It's also probably where the most unexperienced Flink user will start experiencing Flink. So if we can give them an easier path to understanding where the mistakes are and what to do next, it will be better for them and for the whole community.
I really like this like diversity of like, we've built all these, like Gyula knows, we've got all these features, we can do all this stuff. And then Francesco seeing it from a user's point of view, trying to like actually make things happen. And I really like that you're all here and bringing those different perspectives, because I think this is something that every project goes through. And despite iterating quite quickly, you know, Flink actually has pretty much what you need there, which is awesome. Okay, we've got a couple more questions coming in on the chat, which is adorable, and they're pretty good. This one, they're both about SQL. I'm going to pick up on this one that specifically follows your comment, Julia. Are there any ways to deploy pure SQL in a production-ready way? Would you not deploy the SQL client stuff to production?
Yeah. So I don't want to give the bad impression regarding the production readiness of the SQL client. I'm not suggesting that you cannot like run production jobs from the SQL client. It's just that when you're actually running a real production applications, there are a lot of things that you need to take care of. It's the same way as just building a jar, and you will not gonna just simply submit it through the command line client. And this kind of applies to both data stream and SQL programs equally. So, I mean, in the production applications, you want to make sure that logging and all the operational things are configured. And in many cases, this is easier to do if you build like a jar out of your application, and then the other like the regular Flink command line and regular Flink configuration gives you more options to set everything that you need for a proper production experience. So it's not about the features that you get access to, but I would say the overall package. And yeah, so most companies who run Flink in production have some sort of like a deployment stack around this, and probably a regular table API program at this point fits more readily into that stack than the SQL CLI.
Could I ask something? There is one small problem with this SQL, I think, that it's harder to write a unit test on this one. It's much easier to write a unit test on a state function, if you like, or user-defined function, but on a SQL. And when you also try to test SQL, you partially test actually also the Flink code itself. So probably that's something that you want to avoid. However, you can write a decent integration test. So you can at least start with this one and then move forward.
Yeah, I definitely agree with this.
And I think in the process of that discussion, I think you've also answered the next question, which came from Jing, about whether to go only for SQL or whether it's more of a table API, data stream API, and the different types of fits for the business. Now, Elena just came out a little bit against SQL there, and I'm super surprised, because normally you're SQL friendly. Like you are the place I go to learn MySQL. You could make the argument on either side, right? No one's really doing it wrong here.
Yes, actually, I will make I will have a presentation tomorrow. At least for me, it will be tomorrow, and it's advocates towards SQL, but the only thing is when to apply it and why to apply it. So we are engineers. It's applied perfectly in some cases. In some business cases, like in a very diverse team, like when the people needs to explain their idea, people need to write a proof of concept very fast. In some cases, it's not suitable, I think. So that's why I'm saying, okay, yes and no. Like some cases yes, some cases no. But we all are engineers, right? We know that sometimes you just do not want to you just need to select the right tool for your purpose, right?
If you think it's unsuitable, maybe you just don't know enough SQL. I don't know. I'm definitely in that category myself. I'm struggling with even the simplest things. I'm just joking.
Yeah, no, I think there's always room for everyone to know more SQL every now and again. Like I'm only really good at SQL by kind of, web developer standards. And there is so much more to know. And I'm quite enjoying getting exposure to that working with Flink, and hearing you all talking about that and how it fits in your real applications is awesome. And I think that unit testing point that you just made, Elena, definitely resonated with some of our audience, because the next question is, how would you imagine an SQL unit testing framework? So were you imagining an SQL unit testing framework, or were you making a point about whether those two things really go together?
Yeah, so basically there is people who try to actually write a SQL unit tests for databases, let's say. So I'm not the first one to introduce this idea. However, for the SQL, it's harder. So it's harder actually and you need to actually select what you want to test, right? And it's what's harder is to make it really fast because unit test, one of the and isolated. So one of the problem of unit tests is to make it isolated and fast. And what the guys do in this case is they mocked everything they could in memory. But I said it's not a trivial task to do. That's why I said that SQL unit testing is not trivial.
So what do you do when you want to test some new fancy SQL script? Do you have some tips and tricks that you can recommend our audience?
I do the in-memory testing. So I mock. I try to. Well, truly speaking, that I cannot build a truly unit test. But I can build a decent integration test with a part of the SQL. You can usually you can refactor your SQL request in that way that you can build a temporary views of tables, right? And test them separately and mock, if it's possible, the sources of your data, and check that and try to use in memory, if possible, sources. So something that generate data.
Yeah, like the faker.
Yes, like a faker. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes. In worst case scenario, you can use the file system. Also, you can use the different tools from Docker that will generate it. It will be a bit slower, but you can make this faster. So if you really want to check some edge case scenario, you can start some testing cluster in Docker and make things work, test it. Yeah.
This is awesome. I feel like I'm learning a lot. And I think as Flink comes from, lots of people are already using it in production, we know, but it's becoming much more mainstream. I feel like I'm hearing about it at mainstream events as well as this one, and kind of hearing how that's working, how that works in production, how people do it for real is super valuable. So I really appreciate all this input. This is really cool.
If I can add one thing regarding all this discussion about SQL and different APIs. One of the things that I like about Flink is that lets you decide after. So it doesn't impose you a technology or a language before accessing the tool and exploring the tool. Allows you an easy barrier to get into Flink with SQL. And then if that is not enough, if you want to add testing, if you want to rewrite something, you have the other options, which are still in the same tool. You don't have to go outside. Don't you have the SQL function that solves exactly your problem? You can go one level down and add it yourself. This is one of the beauties that I find in Flink, is that it's extremely accessible from different people in different backgrounds.
Yeah, definitely something that I like about it as well. My Java's a bit rusty, but I enjoy Elena's SQL demos. So that is awesome. Okay, there's some really good questions coming in, actually. And this one, I'm going to ask Julia first about the alternatives, because I know there are other things in the kind of streaming pipelines space. This question mentions KSQL DB, but I know we've talked about Faust and Kafka streams. Like, when do you think Flink's a really cool tool?
Well, Flink is always cool. The question, I guess the question is when should you use it, or when should you not use it, maybe, and in favor of alternatives like Kafka streams or KSQL DB. And I think this is it's a tricky question to answer. If you were like building a new team, and you could kind of get any kind of engineer. You could get like people with Flink knowledge, and then I would say just use Flink because it's great and the community is headed in a good direction, and you're gonna have a very good experience going forward. But I mean, there are some cases where the developer experience in the company and the current operational stack or the just makes it a bit impractical to introduce a new tool. So I mean, if you have like a very strong team with Kafka experience, or maybe they have already experience with Kafka streams, and you just want to do some very simple thing, I would not push you to introduce Flink to your stack. So I think you will hit the point where if you start building more complex pipelines, I think it's good to know about Flink, because you will eventually hit the point where it makes sense to introduce Flink to your stack to simplify your life.
Actually, yeah, I want to also add something about KSQL. So KSQL is kind of a force you, gently force you towards using Kafka as a source and as a sink. If you remember correctly, Flink does not have such a limitation. It works with the gDPC and like they have their own connectors. So how they use it in a Kafka world, they have things called Kafka Connect. So you can use any database and upload data from this database and to Kafka, and also use it as a sink. So get the data from Kafka and then store it somewhere else. So you need to do some additional steps to do so. However, this is one thing I find quite interesting. So Flink does not always have all of the connectors that Kafka have. So if you, for example, do not have Flink, is not yet have a, let's say, Snowflake database connector, check Kafka. They might have this connector. So you actually fetch the data from the Snowflake using Kafka connector, store it to Kafka, and then you have working with a Flink. So that's how you can overcome this limitation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, the Kafka Connect and Confluent have like made a big effort to kind of putting all the connectors together and making sure that they cover most of the use cases. I think the Flink community is also trying to improve on this. There are some discussions on having like connector repositories, because at the moment, if you're looking for something, I mean, you might be able to find it, or you might not find it even if it exists. I mean, there are some mentions here in the questions about the Bahir project, which is an external project, Apache project that also has some Flink connectors. Yeah, I agree. It's in many cases it's not easy to find the right connector for you, and you're not sure how well it works. That's the bigger problem.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure that you get the opportunity to give any advice that you would like to people. Now, I know we've got a mixture of people in the audience, people who know Flink really well and are mainlining all of the content at this, and people who are here because they're curious. So my question is, if there's anyone here who's new to Flink, what would you like them to try? And I'm looking for some really geeky answers. What's your most fun thing to do with Flink? What should we try that maybe we, even experienced users, might not have tried before, or that you think is just a super awesome example? Elena, you are giving me a look that says we're going to you first.
Okay, this is not a part of a Flink functionality, but I really want you to try something. So you know that many companies has the problems with the GDPR. So you should not expose any personal information. So, and how like part of the many companies solve this very easily. So they remove the names and replace it with IDs. This is not always a perfect solution. Why? I give you example. For me, for example, right? if I want to give in my company, if I want to give a feedback, and then Flink and everyone else in my company give a feedback, and if they group by country, title, and gender, I will be the only one person in the group, female, Finland, senior software engineer. I will be the only one in the room. You can remove my name completely, but I still will be the one person. You can directly find me by using these messages. And this is, for me, it's personally a big problem. And there is actually this things called many algorithms, but one I like a differential privacy that actually calculate how much personal information you expose. And this is just a small mathematical function that when you group something on a Flink, let's say, right? Like imagine that when you make a grouping, something based on country, gender, and something so forth, you can make a check how much personal information you expose. And if you do that, please share your experience, because I'm really fan of this topic. And yeah.
That is awesome. I'm going to share the Wikipedia link in chat. But Francesco, what would you like people to try when they come to Flink?
I have a couple of suggestions. First of all, I would like to invite people to start reading the Flink documentation, because it's awesome. There is a lot of content, a lot of examples. Second thing, try the SQL client. There is somehow a Dockerized version of the SQL client. I created my own in order to simplify things, to scrape only the necessary. And I believe Lona will be able to share this with you. The third one is, if you just want a streaming SQL interface, well, we are even launching the Flink beta program. And we have a sign-up page that you can use to show your interest. It will be announced and launched in, I believe, towards the end of the year or early next year. So sign up your interest there. So with those 3 resources, you should have all you need in order to start your journey with Flink.
Yula, what would you like people to do or try? What's your favorite thing?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the documentation part. I think this is I would say, the most important advice that I can give to people, even to some more experienced developers. The Flink documentation is awesome. It's a very good place to learn about concepts and to get a good feel about the capabilities of the system. And in most cases, if you have a question or you're wondering about something, just go to the Flink docs, browse through it, and you will be able to find it. It's one of my the best learning resources. Yeah. So I agree with that. And obviously, you need to try the Cloudera streaming platform.
Paste your link. I just pasted Ivan's link. Please post Cloudera's link. Charlotte's here, which means we are officially out of time. But this has been awesome.